All right. Who wants to recap Ruth for me? Anybody? Who wants to recap Ruth? Can anybody tell us the story from chapter 1 to chapter 4? Well, okay, we can do it via question. So Paula asked, how does Ruth get to Moab in the first place? Ruth is a Moabite. Yes. She's born there. Yeah, she was always a Moabite. Yeah. So she was born there. So how does she get connected to Naomi, her mother-in-law? Yeah. So Elimelech, who is an Ephraimite who was living in Bethlehem, so Ephraim, Bethlehem is down here in Judah, right? So Naomi, who was married to Elimelech, they moved to Moab. And that was one of the things that we talked about as we were asking, why would anybody do that, right? Why would you move? Why would you pick up your family and move to a different state or a different country? What's that? Loads of you did. Yeah, how many of you are immigrants to Oregon? Yeah, me too. Yeah, I came here for family and work. But how many of you came over post-World War II, in the post-war economic boom? No? The Iversons did, Vanita Iverson. How many of you came over post-World War II? Like in that economic boom between World War II and the Korean War? No? After that? When did you were a native, right, Paula? Are you a native Oregonian? No, where's your family from? When did you come out here? 40. Yeah, so you were in the, yep. Yep. So you're a post-war family, yeah. You're a native, Ruby. Yeah, you're one of the few in the room. You and Cheryl Ann are native Oregonians here. But yeah, this church is the product of a lot of Midwest migrants. The story that everybody tells around here is that the first pastor came out and knocked on the doors of the homes that had Scandinavian names in their mailboxes. Yeah. Welcome to Milwaukie Lutheran. So why do Naomi and Elimelech pick up their bags and move to Moab? Probably the same reasons that your families did. You know, economic opportunity, maybe there was family connections. So they get to Moab. Their two sons get married to two Moabite women, which is a big deal, right? Because Moabite is not Jew, it's not Hebrew. So they get married to two Moabite women, one of whom is named Ruth, the other of whom is not named Oprah. It's Orpah, right? So everybody dies, just like in Job. Elimelech dies, the two sons die. Naomi and Orpah and Ruth are left as single women in a society and in a world that did not leave a lot of power and self-determination for women. And so Naomi, kind of reading the writing on the wall, says, we need to do something. And Naomi decides that she is going to pack up and go back to Bethlehem, back where Elimelech's family is and where she hopefully has connections. And so she packs up and tells her two daughters-in-law to do what? Go back to their families. Get married to somebody else. You're young. You've got opportunities. Stick around the people that know you, that you know. And they both initially say, no, we're going to stick with you. And then in chapter 1, if you remember, Naomi kind of gives this beautiful piece of poetry articulating the hardships that they're going to face, and Orpah decides to turn back. But Ruth, on the other hand, says, no, I'm sticking with you. And we have this beautiful song out of Ruth, where if you remember, Ruth says, my people, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. And Ruth decides to stick with her. They travel all the way back to Bethlehem. And do you remember, is Naomi recognized there? Do people remember Naomi? Well, who recognizes her specifically? No, not yet. Well, yes, eventually. But who comes out to greet her? I'm fishing, sorry. This is the rule number 1 of what not to do. Yeah, that's exactly it. This is what I do with the confirmation kids. The women remember Naomi. So the women come out to greet her. They kind of help her and Ruth get set up. But how does Ruth initially support both her and Naomi? Gleaning, yeah, coming behind the harvesters who are picking the grain in the field or whatever they're doing. And Ruth is working with them, and she catches the eye of Boaz, who has come to administrate his fields, right? And chaos ensues. Not really chaos. A lot of intrigue. This is a great kind of like romance mystery novel at this point, right? So Ruth catches Boaz's eye, and that was what we talked about 2 weeks ago, was all of the complications that come along with that. And kind of asking the question, is this something that is good for Ruth and Naomi? Are there potential risks? Where does the weight of that all lie? And the answer is it kind of lies in whether or not Boaz is going to be a good dude or not, right? Whether Boaz is going to follow not only his personal code of ethics, whatever that is, but whether he's going to follow the law, as Ruth is pushing it on him at that point. And then we arrive at the ultimate scene in the grain in the mill house, where Ruth uncovers Boaz's feet. Yes. And feet with a question mark. You know, we talked about how there's a lot of pieces in Ruth that might be entendres, double or triple. You know, there are a lot of Hebrew words that serve many purposes. And so the uncovering of the feet might be uncovering of the feet. It might also be a euphemism for something else, but we don't know. But we can imagine. So finally, the great moment happens. Ruth and Boaz have a conversation, and Boaz essentially promises to do the right thing. And he says to Ruth, Ruth, I can absolutely do the thing that I'm supposed to do, which is marry her, but there's somebody else that has a prior claim who is closest next of kin. So we are in 4. We're in a bridge off there because that's where we ended up last week. We are in 4 verse. Well, we can start at verse 1. Let's just, because I kind of rushed this last week. Is everybody in Ruth chapter 4? All right, great. So, does anybody want to read? Or actually, here, I'm going to give you the mic if you do. Can anybody read the first kind of paragraph in chapter 4 there? Brenda, thank you. You do have a mic.
No sooner had Boaz gone up to the gate and sat down there than the next of kin, of whom Boaz had spoken, came passing by. So Boaz said, Come over, friend, and sit down here. And he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the next of kin, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our kinsman, Emil, whatever.
Just say it confidently.
Yeah. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, Buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, so that I may know. For there is no one prior to you to redeem it, and I come after you. So he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, The day you acquire the field from the hand of Naomi, you are also acquiring Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead man, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance. At this, the next of kin said, I cannot redeem it for myself without damaging my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it.
Okay, so what happens here? So I'll quick recap. The process of inheritance for widows is complicated, and insofar as that, again, women in this ancient world were not allowed to own the property that their husband owned. And so if the husband dies, the property is essentially held in trust in the husband's name until she can have a male child who can inherit that property. Now, that's assuming that she doesn't already have a child. So if we're going to, and we called back to this story earlier, which is the story of Judah and Tamar, which gets referenced in Ruth, right? That is a great story of a breakdown in that system. But what's supposed to happen is that the woman, the widow, would be married to the next of kin, the next oldest son or whoever is available. he would get her with a male child who would then receive the inheritance that his father would pass down to him. In this case, Boaz has agreed to facilitate this process, but he's second in line. There is a closer next of kin who would have right, because the right of this is that he gets to possess the property that would come through this marriage deal. And so he approaches this guy, says, hey, here's the deal. There's this property that's come up for sale. Are you willing to possess it? And he's like, yeah, I'm in. Sounds great. I would love to increase my wealth. Wonderful. And then Boaz throws in the hook, which is, by the way, it comes with a couple of extra things. So by the way, Ruth, and notice how, again, Ruth is named in this scenario. Boaz is being kind of tricky here. He says, specifically, Ruth the Moabite. Ruth the Moabite, indicating to this guy that she ain't from around here, right? She's a stranger, right? And then after that, he reinforces the wife of the dead man, and again repeats the dead man whose land you would be inheriting. So this guy says, you know what? That's too much. I'm not willing to take all that on. And Boaz instead is now free to redeem the land as it is. Brenda took off. Brenda's doing things. Speaking of, I would just draw our attention to the beautiful wreaths that are being made. And I want to say a special word of thank you to Jamie, who did an emergency craft store run this morning because yours truly did not buy the thing he was supposed to buy. I brought 50% of the things I was supposed to bring. I brought cedar. No, it's totally my fault. So thank you, Jamie, for being such a wonderful. Yes, this is not just a kids project. There are lots of, and we'll have this stuff available next week if we want to do something with our hands while we're talking more about Advent. So, Boaz marries Ruth. Yay, wedding bells, nuptials, all that good stuff. And I'll just read this next piece. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one party took off a sandal and gave it to the other. This was the manner of attesting in Israel. So when the next of kin said to Boaz, this is the other man, acquire it for yourself, he took off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have acquired from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. Who are Chilion and Mahlon? Sons, thank you, Bishop. They are the two sons of Elimelech and Naomi. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to maintain the dead man's name on his inheritance, in order that the name of the dead may not be cut off from his kindred and from the gate of his native place. Today you are witnesses. Then all the people who were at the gate, along with the elders, said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah. Who are Rachel and Leah? Jacob's wives. And do you remember the circumstances of that family arrangement? Jacob the trickster, right, who stole his brother's inheritance, flees the land, arrives at the land of his uncle, cousin, something like that. Yeah, Laman. Yes, started with an L. Anyways, he gets there. He is greeted by Rachel, who he immediately falls in love with, again, according to the language, and asks for her hand in marriage. And Dad says, well, first you take Leah and then Rachel. It's ancient world, folks. But what's interesting about that story as well, too, is that Leah and Rachel both end up marrying Jacob, and Leah is able to produce children very quickly, and Rachel struggles. There's some really interesting Hebrew play that's going on in there where the names of Leah's children are indicators of the increasing attempt to get Jacob's attention. And I don't remember the exact verbiage, but like her first son is named hear me, see me, notice me, something along those lines. They're all kind of like puns in Hebrew. So the two women that are referenced in this story are women who ultimately are in this line of genealogy of what eventually results in the monarchy in the line of David. But they're also two women who kind of take things into their own hands in that story. And then we go on. I should not have moved around the table. Like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you produce children in Ephrathah and bestow a name in Bethlehem. And through the children that the Lord will give you by this young woman, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So here we go. Here's that direct reference that I was talking about. We talked about it a little bit was it last? No, 2 weeks ago. That's why my brain is off. We had our town hall meeting last week. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about Perez and where Perez falls into the genealogy. But Judah and Tamar, one of my favorite stories in Genesis. Tamar is a widow as well. She is daughter-in-law to Judah. Judah does not do the thing that Judah should have done, which was match her with he does match her with a son, but he never gets her with child. And Tamar eventually traps Judah in a wonderful way in that she poses up as a woman of the night by the roadside. Judah comes and does what those things do, and immediately goes and tries to have this woman arrested and eventually stoned to death for being a prostitute. And Tamar shows up and says, "Oh, but whose rod is this? And whose cloak is this?" And Judah says, "Never mind." It's all good, and eventually gets Tamar with child, and then we get Perez. And so one of the questions that we asked 2 weeks ago that we were talking about is, why are these stories in here? Why are we all of a sudden at the end of Ruth getting these mentions of Rachel and Leah and Perez come by Judah and Tamar? There's no right, in this case I'm not fishing for an answer. Well, we would like to believe that, I think. Well, maybe not. That would definitely be more of a Christocentric perspective. Ruth and the majority of the Old Testament canon are stuff that's compiled post-exile. So it predates Jesus stuff by at least 400 years, right? But, again, Jesus' genealogy, which we're going to reference in a second in Matthew, right, is half of this genealogy. So the genealogy we're talking about here is the genealogy that connects Abraham to second king of unified Israel, David, right? So this is the genealogy that connects Abraham to David, right? The golden era of the unified kingdom. The second half of that genealogy, which is what we get in Matthew, connects David to Jesus, right? Well, it connects the whole thing, but that's the important piece that's missing. So to answer your question, Matt, no, probably not. This probably wasn't some historical editing that was done post-fact. But it definitely changes how we read that story, doesn't it, right? Yeah. A pawn. Great detail. Let's talk about that, though. So, ancient world, different than the modern world, and I don't want to speak authoritatively about nursing practices, but as far as I know, it was not uncommon to have a nursemaid in addition to, okay, hold on. What are the chances that Naomi's producing breast milk? Slim to none. Yeah, okay. Maybe. Is this a figurative role? Here's the question that I find fascinating is why? Why is that specifically mentioned in this story? Lineage, absolutely, yeah. Is it perhaps something about the relationship between Ruth and Naomi? I mean, because here's the fascinating thing about this story is that Ruth and Naomi are calling on the laws of Moses concerning inheritance to make their case, right? And Boaz follows through with this. But Boaz even is kind of stretching the definitions of those laws a little bit, because who is Ruth related to by blood in this community? Nobody. Nobody. It's only by marriage. And so the claim of claim of family between Ruth and Naomi is one of word, right? And we talked about this. You could argue that poem, that song that's in Ruth 1 is almost a creedal statement, right? It's a creedal statement. It's Ruth saying, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. They are naming this tightness of relationship, which is transcendent, right? And a lot of what's going on here is a callback to that, right? It's naming that Ruth, despite not having actual blood ties, despite being a foreigner, an immigrant, a Moabite, is somebody that in this case is doing the things that are she's doing the Jewish thing. She's doing the Hebrew thing. She is, we reference, she is the most Hebrew in this community in terms of following the laws of righteousness. But let's read that passage, not just reference it. Okay. So we're down at verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When they came together, the Lord made her conceive. And I would just highlight that a little bit. And we've talked about this a lot. In terms of divine agency, the Hebrew peoples, the ancient peoples, kind of had God as the prime mover in everything, right? So everything had God's hand in it one way or another. This phrase, the Lord made her conceive, is a specific callback or reference saying the Lord blessed her, okay? If we go back and we read about Abraham and Sarah, a lot of the, that's not necessarily a good example. It is. A lot of the language around that is language of when is God going to give me this baby that I've been waiting for, right? And of course, Abraham and Sarah take it into their own hands, and hence we get the story of Hagar and Ishmael and all that jazz. But this specific line, the Lord made her conceive, is a line to pay attention to. It is, essentially acknowledging that God has blessed this woman. And she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without next of kin, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life." Where do we hear this phrase applied? Restorer of life. Who else do we hear this kind of language? Jesus, yeah. I shouldn't say that. I was going to say, obviously, this isn't a direct reference to Jesus, but what is the acknowledgement here? What is this hope that is being placed in this child? Restorer of life. Why? What does that phrase mean to you? What does that sound like? Restorer of life. If I said to you, this child that you're having is a restorer of life, your family is going to continue on. It could be in terms of prosperity of lineage. Does it have immediate implications? He redeems the property. Yes, it's definitely kind of a callback or an acknowledgement there. The two peoples, yeah. Or the relationship between Naomi and Ruth and Boaz. I mean, literally, Ruth and Naomi's lives have been redeemed through this whole thing. Yeah. Sorry, Andrea, you were saying something? Okay. Don't be afraid to shout out. And a nourisher of your old age. How many of us need nourishers of our old age? This is, by the way, my wife and I have not had children, and we're in our 40s, so if you haven't done the math yet, probably not going to happen, but this is the question that comes up to us, who's going to be our nourisher in our old age, I just flew back to Michigan to, take care of my dad after his knee replacement. Right? I got to be his nourisher in old age. More like I was his pain in the butt that woke him up every 4 hours to take his meds and make sure he put the ice pack on. Yeah. Yes. We're in a different world. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about houses, from a modern perspective, we're talking about buildings that we own and or rent and or live in. House in ancient world was more of an indicator of family. It had to do with the building, but house included grandparents, grandchildren, cousins, a family, managed, operated property depending on what their profession or whatever was. But you took care of your grandparents into your old age. That is the Ten Commandment call to honor your father and mother. It's not just don't be a pain in the butt to them. It's the whole caboodle. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, when FDR established Social Security, I don't think he was imagining us living into our 90s. Yeah, which is why 65 is when it kicks in, right? Sorry, Susan, what were you saying? Absolutely, absolutely. What a miserable way to go, too. Oof. Which is why you brush your teeth and floss every day. um, I don't know. I had something else I was going to talk about. I forgot. Who is naming this blessing upon Naomi, by the way, or upon the son? I kind of glossed over it. The women, the same women who recognized Naomi when she came into town on day one after they came over from Moab, the women are saying to Naomi, this is the blessing. And here's the power, for me, the powerful part. So after that, nourisher of old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Whoa. Wow. That is a pretty um, audacious statement. And then, Paula, the verse that you pointed out, then Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and became his nurse. So, and again, I haven't looked at the specific Hebrew here, not that it would help much in any case, but nurse in this case might not necessarily, probably doesn't mean that she is nursing the child in the way that we might literally think of it, but there's something significant which is going on here, which is the women have just said to Naomi, this boy is in some ways a metaphor, but it's a symbol of how the Lord has redeemed you, but your daughter-in-law has redeemed you. This child is the symbol, of the nourishing of into your old age. This is your hope and your promise going forward. And this isn't something that you can really theologize, but this is a beautiful visual image, right? Is that the image we close with is grandma with her grandson lying on her chest, right? Okay, I know we've got a few grandmothers in this room and grandfathers, right? We don't have to limit this, gender specificity, but is that an image that resonates, that tugs your heartstrings? Yeah. And this is something, this is I hate to beat this drum all the time, but this is something that I would highly, encourage you to think about, which is that we tend to think of Scripture, whether it's, Old Testament, New Testament, whatever, as merely, relaying facts to us, facts which are important for our beliefs, right? In this case, and this is one of my favorite things about the book of Ruth, is the rich imagery. In this case, the author, I think, is specifically invoking a visual image for you or an emotional image to close out this story. I mean, we close out with some more data, but this is essentially the way that this story ends. And it began with Naomi losing everyone, right? Begins with Naomi losing her husband and her 2 sons, and not just losing people, but losing hope, right? We've talked ad infinitum about the vulnerability of widows and children in the ancient world. This is a redemption of that, right? The story has come full arc, and the redemption is that little boy lying on her chest. Yes, ma'am. Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? Absolutely. And this came up. Somebody asked this specifically. It might have been you, Maureen. You know, is Ruth Boaz's first wife, or first and or only? And the answer is maybe, probably not. We don't know, right? The story doesn't tell us. But we do know that in the ancient world, wealth attributed opportunities, shall we say, and that by and large, wealth was descendants. Boaz, we don't know concretely, but we suspect is older than Ruth. You know, we can't really ballpark it, but chances are, if he has this amount of wealth and he's made it this far maybe he's young, ripe age of 40, right? Chances are he's probably got other children with otherwise, but we don't know. We don't know. We can imagine, but it's a good question. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Bum. Yeah. Yes. Now, the remaining verses here are the genealogy that we named. I'll just read it real quick because I do want to spend the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes doing the thing that I promised Jamie that I do, which is talk about Advent. So just, these are the descendants of Perez. And again, it's unique that the genealogy starts way back with Judah and Tamar. So the descendants of Perez. Perez became the father of Hezron, Hezron of Ram, Ram of Aminadab, Aminadab of Nahshon, Nahshon of Salmon, Salmon of Boaz, Boaz of Obed, Obed of Jesse, and Jesse of David, right? So this, and again, Matt, you were asking that question, is when they compile or when they write or when they edit the book of Ruth, what is the perspective? We know that at least this version of Ruth is recorded after the monarchy, right? Because, it's listing the genealogy of Perez from Judah all the way through to King David, right? So Ruth is long gone by the time that this book is written down. So again, it's not necessarily from a Christian perspective, but this story is important to the Hebrew people because it is the story of the family of David, right? So, yeah. And again, we talked about, this is one of 5 texts that is read year-round in the Hebrew cycle of celebrations. This is a very important story for reasons, right? Yeah. And those are the important people, right? Those are the important. Well, flip to Matthew 1 real quick. Let's, and again, this is, I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but this is such a cool. So, an account of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David. Now, he's not technically the son of David. He's many generations removed, right? So this is more of a title. The son of Abraham. Again, Abraham, the father of Isaac, Isaac, Jacob, Jacob, Judah and his brothers, Judah and Tamar. So Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Tamar is the first woman that is named in the genealogy, okay? Hold on to that. And Perez, the father of Hezron, Hezron, the father of Aram, Aram, the father of Aminadab, Aminadab, the father of Nahshon, Nahshon, the father of Salmon, Salmon, the father of Boaz, by Rahab, the second woman that we've had in this genealogy. So far, Tamar and Rahab. And Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth, and Obed, the father of Jesse, Jesse, the father of King David. Pause. We've made it 12 generations. Now we need to do 12 more. David was the father of Solomon by the wife of Uriah. Who's the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Bathsheba. Bathsheba. So if you recall that story, David sees Bathsheba bathing on a roof, bathing on a roof, is overcome with lust for her, and sends Uriah, her husband, off to the front lines of war so that he gets killed, and there are consequences for that. So Solomon by Uriah, Solomon, father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, of course, is responsible for splitting the United Kingdom into two. Rehoboam, the father of Abijah. Abijah, the father of Asaph. Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat, one of my favorite names in the Bible. Jehoshaphat, the father of Joram. Joram, the father of Uzziah. Uzziah, the father of Jotham. Jotham, the father of Ahaz. Ahaz, Hezekiah. Hezekiah, Manasseh. Manasseh, Amos. Amos, Josiah. Josiah, Jeconiah, and exile. So we've come 12. 12 again. Now we got 12 more. And after the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah, Salathiel, Zerubbabel, another great name, Zerubbabel, Abiud, Eliakim, Azor, Zadok, the first high priest in the temple, Zadok, Achim, Eliud, Eleazar, Matan, Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom Jesus is born, who is called the Messiah. Okay? So just a couple of things to point out there. There are three women specifically named in that narrative, in that genealogy: Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth. Okay, Tamar and Rahab Rahab is accounted in the narrative as being a prostitute. It's more likely that she was a single woman who was a successful merchant. And Rahab was in the city of Jericho, whom Joshua sends his spies to before they march around it with the trumpets and blow the walls down. Yeah. So I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but it's worth repeating, is that the three women that are mentioned in Jesus' genealogy are all women who make things happen on their own, but they're all women who, from a certain perspective, would not be the textbook definition of righteousness, right? Would not be the textbook definition of righteousness. And yet, each of the narratives about these women is saying, no, this is the image of righteousness. So, like, the powerful thing about this for me is it is taking, well, put simply, Jesus' genealogy is not a Disney fairy tale, right? There's a lot of chaos and people doing what they need to do that happens in it. And I don't know. I guess the one thing I would just say about that is, when we get to Christmas Eve, the tendency is like, okay, here's the baby Jesus. Everything's perfect. Nothing is perfect, right? That's the whole point. Nothing is perfect. Not in his genealogy. Not in, they show up at the inn and there's no room because, Joseph forgot to book it in hotels.com, all that jazz. Anyways, this is a perfect segue into talking about Advent, which is what we're going to do next week as well, too. I didn't necessarily plan on taking this much time with Ruth, but it's okay. So let's do a quick quiz. Where does Advent come from? Time period, ballpark it. Where do you think? When do you think we first started celebrating these 4 Sundays before Christmas? I'll be honest. When I researched this, I had no idea. I was stumped. Because how many of you grew up doing a lot of Advent stuff? How many of you made Advent? Did anybody go to Advent services? Like ours were like on late Wednesday nights. All I remember is it was always dark, and I was the default acolyte because my brother and I were the only 2 kids that age at that time that could light the candles. Apparently, you have to be a boy between the ages of 8 and 12 to light candles. I don't know. So we went to all the Advent services. Did anybody do Advent calendars? What's in your Advent calendar? Was it a food present or like a little toy present? espresso machine in your advent calendar? No, sorry. Like a carafe, like the thing, not the handle. So how many advent things have you opened so far? 8. Good. I mean, geez, Louise, smart kid. What it? 8th. Nailed it. Did you have you been doing an advent calendar too? Oh, that you open up. Yeah. Do you have one of those, Max? What does he get every day? Dude, you are making the rest of us look bad, Max. You are such a good child. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That is adorable. I feel like a bad son now. Yeah. So the chocolate piece I can totally resonate with. My wife, who is French, that is what advent calendars are, right? Why would you get an advent calendar if you don't get chocolate from it? But the problem is she doesn't like milk chocolate. You know, it's got to have at least like 70% cocoa for it to actually be chocolate. So advent calendars, what do they count? They count down to Christmas. Yeah, yeah. So does anybody remember, or did you ever have an advent wreath that had not just the 4 big candles, but the little red ones? Anybody have that? Yeah. So Advent count, the one we've got in the sanctuary has the 4 blue candles. It has the Christ candle in the center. The ones I grew up with had 6 little red candles in between the 4 blue ones, because you would light them each day of Advent, right? Yeah, so you would write, because there's, it's 4 Sundays with 24, days in between the Sundays. Advent originates, best guess, 5th century. Yeah, so there's a guy named Saint Martin of Tours, which is in France, who, and this is such a church thing, basically started Advent by declaring that all the monks in his catchment area should fast for the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas, which I have to get a kick out of. It's like default, let's do something special, make the monks fast, So that apparently was the beginning of Advent, and it just kind of evolved over time. But Advent, as we know it now, doesn't really take off until like the 14th century. One of the popes, I forget who it was, basically officially declared, this is what we're all going to do. And here's the interesting, what are the colors of Advent, or what is the color of Advent? Yeah. But purple. What are the color of our candles in the sanctuary? They're blue. Yes. So here's the funny thing, is that this is actually one of the major disagreements between some Protestant denominations and Catholic denominations. And it has a lot to do with the emphasis of Advent. So Advent, back ye old days, 2,000 years ago, was fasting, and it was essentially kind of a Lent light. It was Lent part 2, wherein you were doing piety things to get closer to God. And it changes around the 14th, 15th centuries. Anybody know the origins of Advent wreaths, the things that we are beautifully making over here? Those are gorgeous, by the way. Hey, September, can you show us your Advent wreath real quick? Would you be willing? Do you have like a production line going here, September? Do you have a, sorry, never mind. Yeah, are you willing to, just come up and show everybody? Oh, MJ. Nice job, Max. By the way, this is not a generationally specific activity. Jamie, would you be willing to have these materials out here next week as well, too? Yes. Kes, come on up, Ellis. Oh my goodness. Nice job, kiddo. I like the one large branch in the middle. It looks like a cactus almost. I love that design. Puzzle. I've never had an Advent puzzle. Alice, what did you show us there? What's that? Is that like a candle thing? Lantern. Thank you. Thank you for the technical terminology, Jamie. I was getting there. Yes, they do. Yes, it is called, oh shoot. There's a French there's a French name. Can I tell you a quick story that's a little bit off topic? So I already mentioned last week how Ellen organizes her ducks, right? She messes up idioms. The other one is, and again, it's a translational thing, is Father Christmas, right, is Le Père de Noël. Well, she was trying to come up with the name Santa Claus, and it wasn't catching for her, and so she said, Christmas Daddy. It's like, so close. So close. But so when we give Chris gifts at Christmas, all of her gifts are from Christmas Daddy. Anyways. So Advent calendars are actually a Lutheran or Advent wreaths are actually a Lutheran creation, believe it or not. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the person that did the research on it was one of my professors at Luther, Mary Jo Hamig, who was interesting lady. She was very intense. But dates back, so theoretically dates back to like the 17th century, 1600s, somewhere around there, out of Germany, of course. I mean, where else would you get all of the nice greenery from? And this is one of those things I get frustrated because everything is like, well, it used to be a pagan practice. So one of the theories is that Advent wreaths were originally wreaths with candles in them that were used to mark the solstice, okay, and that they evolved out of that. You can't quite. That's an idea, right? It's not for sure. Anyways, at some point, newly formed Lutherans, because again, 16th century is solidly during the latter days of the Reformation. People started creating wreaths with the 4 candles in them / 24 candles in them, marking the days. And here's the funny thing: this is one of the few things that we can claim to have influenced Catholicism in. Is then the Catholic Church adopted Advent wreaths in the latter end of the 19th century as part of their practice, but stuck with purple, not blue, right? They're solidly in the purple camp. Blue, by the way, is also a thing that I wouldn't say it's uniquely Lutheran. Like Methodists, I think, and Episcopalians give you the option, blue or purple. They're both acceptable. I was just talking with Pastor Katie over at Milwaukie Presbyterian about this. But generally speaking, purple is, again, connected with Lent. Purple is the color of Lent. But the Catholic tradition kind of holds up this pietism as the Advent practice. And the reason that Lutherans changed to blue was because blue was seen more as a color of hope. So, a different emphasis for this time of year, hope, in place of just, songs in a minor key and doom and gloom texts out of Matthew nonstop. So next week, Jamie has graciously agreed to have these materials available, and we will have bigger foam things. So I will highly encourage all of you to participate. Yes, it's a great way to prune bushes and trees. Jamie, I will order 40 foam wreaths this afternoon. I got it. This is my mea culpa. This is my penance for forgetting it in the first place. Next week, while we're doing this wreath making, I want to have another conversation around Advent, specifically around the word preparation. I had a whole great spiel prepared today about how we prepare for things, particularly those of you who have prepared to have children come into your life, and how that makes you ready or not ready to do that. Dude, MJ, you've got your priorities straight, kiddo. Candle and a cookie. All right, folks, thanks. Good to see y'all. We got worship in 25-ish minutes, so get your coffee. See you in there. Yes. Yeah. One thing that we share in common there.